Okay, we're going to call to order this September 5th, 2023 Land Use and Development Committee. I have done the attendance and all members are present, so we have quorum. First item of business is a consent agenda. You'll see that the consent agenda includes a request to approve the minutes of the August 8th, 2023 regular meeting and the recommendation of the approval of the bills and transfers which you were sent in your email. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by member Abel, seconded by member Friedrich. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. So third item on our agenda is appearance of members of the public or county employees. We have a number of people who have asked to speak today. So I'm gonna go in order that they wrote and asked for permission. Where would you like for them? Okay, put him in there. Okay, so our first speaker will be Mr. Don Carlson.
Good morning. My name is Don Carlson. I live at 208 Kreitzer in Bloomington. I think that's Ward 4. I'm the executive director of an organization called Illinois People's Action. And I'd like to speak to the proposed CO2 ordinance. The piece that I'm going to be discussing is the minimum human health and safety standards that are frankly not included in the ordinance. And our suggestion is going to be is to stop, reconsider, and go back to the drawing boards and prepare an ordinance that addresses both the issues I'm going to present and the issues that others will as well. When we shared the draft ordinance that you have with other people, including some experts, they asked where the rest of it was. You know, was there a second and a third and a fourth page? And we had to tell them that it wasn't, that this was the entirety of the ordinance. So if you look at what's actually on the paper, there's 109 words that describe road repair. Okay. The county seems to have a pretty good expertise on how to deal with roads and road repair. Do you know how many words are used to talk about human health and safety? 23 words. That needs to be a piece that we need to bump up a little bit. The emergency response plan in the proposed ordinance really isn't a plan at all, but it's a statement of future intent. The ordinance, I'm going to go through a list of things that we pulled out that are holes in what you're going to be looking at today. The ordinance doesn't give any decision-making primacy to emergency responders in the development of the plan. It talks about people getting together and working something out. This county needs to have the final say-so on what an emergency plan looks like, and specifically the emergency responders that work for the county. Number two, without explicit technical safety guidance, emergency responders may not even know what to include in the plan. A couple of years ago, there was an accident of CO2 down in Sartasia, Mississippi. Put a couple dozen people in the hospital, injured a couple hundred other people, and the emergency response folks had no clue what to do. And so you need to have emergency response people that know what it is that needs to be included in the emergency response plan. The applicants who will be coming through this ordinance aren't required to share the maximum volume of CO2 that could be released or the location of the emergency shutoff valves. Now, there's a difference between what you're looking at today and what's happening down in Decatur with ADM. There's over 100 permits that have been filed with the EPA to do this sequestration. Only 2 have been approved, both of which are in Decatur. Now, the difference is that the possible amount of CO2 that's going to be coming through these pipelines is 85 times the amount than what is happening in Decatur right now. So they're drinking out of a fire hose, they're drinking out of a garden hose, you're drinking out of a fire hose. And ADM, as you can imagine, also has on-site 24/7 staff, right, to deal with this. When they put this sequestration well where we believe they propose to do it, there is going to be nobody there. They're not going to staff this thing, right? It's going to be all automated. I see I have a minute left. The ordinance emergency plan doesn't address what happens when emergency response vehicles cannot get to the site of the accident. And that's because CO2 displaces oxygen. What happened in Mississippi was when there was an accident, the CO2 displaced the oxygen and the cars couldn't run. Okay, they had to get out of the cars and do this all on foot. So who's gonna buy the electric vehicles? That's gonna have to be able to go if the accident happens at the sequestration site. Right now, the ordinance says you have to do it, essentially, right? So you need to make the decision power on who has the authority for the emergency equipment. And barricading roads. Because CO2, if there's an accident, is invisible and is lower than it hugs the surface of the ground, you have to close off the area to the danger zone. And the company, the applicant, will need to provide that disaster plan to you. And I see that I'm out of time. In conclusion, you have to get this right. You can't kick the can down the road and think that the EPA or the state is somehow gonna solve you. You just really need to
Thank
get
you,
it right.
Mr. Carlson, thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Handy.
Hi, I'm Julie Grandy, I live at 905 North Evans. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking in opposition to the ordinance that the zoning board is considering. It will allow CO2 to be pumped underground at a place that it would endanger the Mohammed Aquifer, the only source of drinking water for 850,000 residents of central Illinois. Let's be clear that this board does have the power under federal law to regulate underground injection. You cannot argue that your hands are tied in this matter, and the power remains in the regulations also in the state of Illinois, which I want to quote, under water pollution. Quote, "The provisions of this act authorizing implementation of water pollution regulations shall not be construed to limit, affect, impair, or diminish the authority, duties, and responsibilities of the board, agency, department, or any other governmental agency or officer, or of any unit of local government to regulate and control pollution of any kind, to restore, to protect, or to enhance the quality of the environment, or to achieve other purposes or to enforce provisions set forth in this act." So you do have the power to regulate this. I want to just highlight a couple of the many concerns that will be, I'm sure, raised by other speakers also. We need to acknowledge that accidents do happen, that CO2 gas migrates up going through the aquifer, and once this happens, it's like your virginity is lost. You can't ever get it back again. There's no way to restore it, no way to reestablish water purity of the aquifer. It will take 100 years or more for the CO2 that's being pumped underground to liquefy, and that's what's been touted as the solution, that eventually it will become solid, but this takes too long and accidents can happen in the meantime. Are we willing to risk permanent damage to the aquifer? That's my question. And what about liability? People who want a permit to drill down and pump CO2 underground need to accept financial responsibility for accidents that cause water contamination and health harms. But there is no requirement in the application to do so. McLean County could be on the hook for eventual accident claims. Next question, what happens when sequestration pumping station is abandoned? As of February 2022, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Abandoned Mines Land Program has 590 unfunded mine reclamation projects in its inventory. Are you going to make applicants responsible for permanent removal and mitigation of the site? Or will the county have to pick up the tab? Setback requirements are another important issue. Pressurized CO2 presents a far greater danger to human health than oil or gas leaks. You can't really put those on the same track. You can't say it's just like oil and gas leaks, because it's not. A much bigger setback should be mandated than the 1,000 feet setback currently in place for oil and gas pipelines. To protect residents and businesses from this toxic gas, we need to require applicants for sequestration permits to provide CO2 detectors and alarms for residents and businesses. And emergency teams need to be trained and know how to do where the emergency set-off valves are. And the applicants must provide this information that's currently not required. So when you carefully consider these matters, I hope you will either set up much more stringent permitting requirements, or that you will consider banning sequestration operations in our county, as you have done with fracking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Margaret Kalin?
Good morning. I'm Margaret Kalin from 304 North Woodlawn in Downs, Illinois. So far, there are no regulations on the books specific to CO2 pipelines and sequestration, which go hand in hand. The well's gonna have to have a pipeline coming into it. PHMSA, and I'm sorry I don't have what those words mean, but it's a federal agency that is creating those regulations. What those regulations are creating over CO2 specific pipelines won't be completed until October of 2024 at the earliest. It's a very good reason to call an actual moratorium on considering the pipelines and on even creating zoning rules about them until we know what we're dealing with here. It is different than gas and oil. These rules will protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public from any grandfathering in of wells that want to come in before those rules are made. And I think that is probably the main focus of this body, health, safety, and welfare of the people. Illinois does not have underground injection control primacy. We don't have that. The permit that we have is for the EPA has that primacy. There are only 2 states that have control over their own, and I know one is North Dakota and there's a second one, that's it. So we're dependent on EPA to take care of our protection here. The setbacks you have, talking about Sartars, Mississippi, where the pipeline blew up in February of 2020, that blow up was half a mile from the town. 49 people were hospitalized, many of them still have respiratory problems because of that. And 300 people had to be evacuated. The setbacks of 1,000 feet from residential and commercial and hospitals and schools, it's just not gonna work. It's a different thing that we're dealing with here. The pipeline that built that line that blew up was the largest in the United States and had over 1,300 miles built. And we right now have only 5,000 miles, so they have a major portion of it. Navigator, Heartland, the one that's wanting to come into McLean County, has never built a CO2 pipeline. When a pipeline blows, it's called unzipping. The explosion is so violent it splits the pipeline in both directions and keeps going until it reaches a safety shutoff valve. Navigator's decision is to put safety valves every 7 miles. So if one split, it can split for 7 miles and impact whatever's there for 7 miles. If it's not near towns, hospitals, close to people, concentrated people, then it's 20 miles between each safety valve. The setback amounts in number 2 are inadequate and I think need to be rethought in connection to the dangers that this kind of pipeline proposed. In terms of safety, the head of EMTs of Sangamon County had met with Navigator. Navigator said, we talked all over, we have lots of safety ideas, and the EMT person got up and said, nothing there is helping us. You know, what we need would be fire engines, ambulances, all electric, because anything that comes near this, all the oxygen is sucked out for people, for animals, for vehicles. Those vehicles die. They don't work. So, and for people who live there, all electric vehicles should be provided for them too. We have very little time to get out, if you can. And so that would be the only way that maybe some people could get away. So it's a big, big money thing, and who's gonna provide all of that? So far, there's no sequestration site for Navigator. Other communities, townships have said no to them, so they can't build, it's a pipeline to nowhere. If McLean County is the one who says, yeah, we'll zone for sequestration wells, then we're opening up not only Heartland, but, you know, according to a study done by a Princeton, in the next few years, 60,000 miles of this kind of pipeline need to come in to deal with our CO2 problem. And Illinois is like a mecca because of our shale. And that's another thing, the idea that any kind of a physical barrier is going to be completely, you can't get through it is not true. And CO2 can move. It can bind to benzene, can bind to arsenic, and it can move around. It moves up and moves down once it gets under the ground.
Your time is up.
Okay,
Thank you,
we
Ms.
get into
Gale.
our water. Thank you for listening.
Ms. Susan Lawson? Have that correct.
Susan Latta, I am not from McLean County. I live at 4606 Baker Lane in Bartonville, Illinois. And the reason why I'm here is I want to start with a quote. If you build it, they will come. And I'll choke up. I'm speaking as a citizen, but I also happen to be a precinct committee person in Peoria County. And I'm a precinct committee person for Lake Camelot. I live on the west end of Bartonville, and if you put a well in, which not only affects McLean County, but it's going to affect, then therefore the pipeline will come through. And I'm uphill, upline to that pipeline, as are many other people. And I'm sure you're aware that there's been discussion that the pipeline may go through the south end of Peoria, which is a financially disadvantaged area. Also through a financially disadvantaged area in Pekin. High population in the south end of Peoria, not that far from Bartonville. Another route that's being discussed is west of Bartonville in near Hannah City and running just alongside Lake Camelot, again, my precinct. I've spoken with farmers just west of Camelot and some of my people like Camelot, and of course they're extremely concerned. There's quite a few people, I can't tell you the numbers, that live in Lake Camelot, and that's just alongside the lake. So you're talking about a fairly well populated area, or if through the south side or somewhere in between, you're talking about even higher population. I was fortunate enough to, at the Peoria Public Library a couple of weeks ago, one of the gentlemen that succumbed along with his brother to the CO2 gas in Sartasia came up and spoke to us. And also an ET person who happened to be the one that, with some assistance, went in with oxygen masks and saved him and his brother who almost died. And he described the scene. And there were people lying all over the ground who had succumbed. And some people who were more distant from it, because their vehicles wouldn't start, tried to get away and went onto the highway. And people were picking them up on the highway because they couldn't get away. He said it was the worst disaster scene he had ever seen. So the problem is it's not only in McLean County, but what's going to happen if this well is built here is the whole line that comes to this well. And that's why I'm here. So, thank you.
Emily Jacobson?
Hi, my name is Emily Jacobson. I live in Washington, Illinois, and I don't have a whole lot of very specific things to say. I'm just here lending a voice of support to everybody that has already spoken and is going to speak after me.
Ms. Dawn Dannenberg?
Thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak today. I want you to start just by thinking of everything you've already done this morning that required the use of water. Did you take some morning pills with a glass of water? Drink a cup of coffee? Brush your teeth, wash your hands, rinse out your coffee cup, throw a load of laundry in the wash? Americans use on average 80 gallons of water every day. The Mahomet Aquifer is designated by the EPA as a sole source water location. You've already heard for 850,000. I've heard now that it's approaching 1 million, and that as the area grows, they expect that number to increase. In 2014, the McLean County Zoning Board of Appeals made a unanimous recommendation to the county board, which voted 15-3 against allowing Minard Run, an out-of-state oil drilling company, to drill near the Mahomet Aquifer for fear of contamination. Well, let me tell you, what they're talking about with CO2 is much worse. First of all, they're talking about drilling through the aquifer. This creates problems for two reasons. One is they're talking about cement casing to provide protection from leaks. And even though they have talked about this brand new cement that they have that's much hardier, how many of you in this room have cracks in the cement, in your sidewalk, in your roads, anywhere? Cement cracks eventually, even new cement. And you heard that it won't solidify for up to 100 years. Now the new information is it may never solidify because of the saline solution that the CO2 would be in. And so the second point is, you already heard that above ground CO2 tends to settle, it displaces oxygen. Below ground it is buoyant, and it will seek the least path of resistance upwards. So any kind of well casing that fails, already one of the 6,000 abandoned mines that finds that pathway, it will migrate north and into the aquifer. In the coming months, even today, you're going to be asked to be making decisions that affect the lives of your neighbors and friends. I don't know how much money these companies are offering, but it isn't enough. There is no amount of money that is going to be enough if somebody dies as a result of this, even if somebody loses their water. So the town of Normal uses 10 million gallons of water a day, and it gets its water from 12 wells into the Mahomet Aquifer. Can McLean County afford to buy water buffaloes for every one of the people who would lose their water? That's a lot of money and a new source of water to have to find. You heard that the US EPA has stated as recently as last week to me that specifically state and local jurisdictions have the right for more stringent protections for their own citizens. So I want to end with you thinking about who wants this and why they want it. It's private companies and it's for profit, their own profit. And then think about who doesn't want it and why. Well, we don't want it because it's a risk to public health and our water supply. I mean, this is a vibrant community. We want people to want to come here, not, oh yeah, that's the biggest municipality in the entire country that has lost its water source because of bad planning. So those of us testifying here today, we ask you to protect us. Please be brave. Take a stand. No storing out-of-state CO2 waste under our feet and risking our drinking water. Pass a moratorium on all CO2 sequestration in McLean County. Thank you.
Marlia White?
I believe Mary Lee had a doctor's appointment, so.
Okay, thank you for that. William Rao, your last speaker.
Good morning. I'd like to reiterate the points I made back in February 27th, the first hearing on this issue. And that concerns carbon sequestration technology. The experiment in the trial at ADM in Decatur demonstrated convincingly and empirically this technology is an abject failure. That plant was releasing about 4.4 million metric tons of CO2 per year. It was sequestering 500,000, 12% of the total. So this technology will make global warming worse. It won't abate it, it won't address it, it won't attack it. And it will end up probably being a smokescreen for the fossil fuel industry to continue business as usual. So that's point two. Point one. Point two is CO2 applications in industry is sort of a small scale niche operation now. Dry ice, carbonization of drinks, a few other applications. Yet, since the 1980s, there have been roughly 900 deaths per year from carbon dioxide poisoning. Now, we know that, I'm an industrial sociologist, there is no industrial process that is fail-safe, that is error-prone, that can't have errors. As this industry scales, which this tax boondoggle will bring about, the death rate will climb. We know for the oil industry that they have several hundred leaks per year, some of them are major, that will lead to massive environmental degradation. But those oil spills generally don't kill people. The difference between oil pipelines and CO2 pipelines is CO2 pipelines have the clear and present danger of claiming lots of lives. Think of Lake Nyassa in the Cameroon, where 1,800 people died overnight after a massive explosion in CO2 emissions from that lake. CO2 in large quantities is a killer. So ask yourself this simple question: who benefits from this proposal? Joe Manson, some of his buddies will be able to buy billion-dollar yachts. Who's going to benefit in Bloomington or McLean County? What's in this for us, other than turning some of the best farmland in the world into a dumping ground for the nation's waste that shouldn't be produced in the first place? We need to reduce radically, quickly carbon dioxide, not store it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the end of our public comment for today. So let's move on to item number 4, departmental matters, and Phil Dick with Building and Zoning. We've got 2 items to present. First is 4A1A, request approval of an escrow agreement with Blooming Grove Wind Farm. I'm gonna give you a report and then.
I'll defer to the state's attorney's office.
Thank you, Chair Klein. Attached is the most recent escrow agreement that was developed with the Blooming Grove Wind Energy Center. There are 94 sites, and this one is guided by the statewide agricultural mitigation agreement that requires that they have 10% of their estimated decommissioning costs within 1 year of operation. They are funding 10%, or if this agreement is approved, the decommissioning value is about $4 million, so they'd be putting in 10% of that upon approval of the agreement.
So just a point of clarification, in the past, we have gone through personal agreements between the county and these wind farms, but this one's now, the major part of it has been taken out of our control in a sense by that 10% set by the IAMA. Is that
That's
right?
correct, that's
Right,
the
this is the new
Department
law.
of Agriculture.
Right, the new law that has passed. So essentially, the terms of this agreement have been set by state law, for the most part.
Well, I mean, it just, the state law says 10%, I think, financial assurance, and it's still up to the county to determine in what form we're going to accept financial assurance.
Okay.
So I think they initially had suggested a surety bond, but I think it's been the policy of the county board to negotiate for escrow accounts. So they did agree to an escrow account. US Bank is the third party. So the 10% is still guided by that state law, but the specific terms of these agreements, the county still has some say in dictating those.
I realize I didn't actually get a motion to put this on the floor. Someone would have moved to put this on the floor.
I'll motion.
Motion, Crystal Abel, second, member Friedrich, thank you, sorry. Does anybody have any questions for the state's attorney's office?
Are we ready to vote?
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great, thank you so much. So that should keep it, we're kind of current now with all of the wind farms.
I believe so, yes.
Long road, thank you for all that work. Okay, so the next, Phil, is 4A1B, text amendment of the zoning ordinance to allow a special use, by special use carbon dioxide sequestration dwelling with use standards. Can I get a motion to put this on the floor for discussion? Member Abel. Second, Member Friedrich, okay. So Phil, if you wouldn't mind, before you give your report, I will say a couple of things. Is that okay? All right. So just as sort of a follow-up, since the spring, just as a reminder, we had a CO2 work group, and we still do have a CO2 work group. Our work is not finished. The membership is Crystal Abel, myself, member Catherine Metzger, Cassie Taylor, Phil Dick, Tony Grant, and Trevor Sierra. We have met 5 times starting in March to talk through some of the various issues that this CO2 sequestration issue brings up for our county. In the course of those meetings, in addition to sort of discussion about, how we feel about all of these things, we've heard from Bill Bodine from the Illinois Farm Bureau. We heard from the company itself, who also brought some drilling contractors to answer some questions. We heard from some environmental groups, Ariel Hampton and Pamela Richard with the Eco Justice Collaborative. And then we had a meeting where we primarily focused our attention on talking to other counties. That is what are people in other parts of the state doing. And I've continued those conversations outside of those CO2 work group meetings. So the result of these meetings and discussions has been, and I think I speak for the group, so tell me if I don't, but a general agreement about our approach to CO2 projects, which of course we're going to have to request consent from our board colleagues. Chief among our concerns and our conversations in these work groups has been to sort of get clarity about what the county can do legally with respect to permits and siting, and what we can do in terms of the ICC process, which is the Illinois Commerce Commission, which is what guides the pipeline approval process, and what we can do in terms of the EPA process, which is where the permits for the wells will be mitigated or discussed or approved. And it's my general understanding that we have a very limited legal ability because of home rule issues, if you want to maybe clarify, Trevor, a little bit.
Sure, Chair Klein, a number of commenters have spoken on the Safe Drinking Water Act and how the act does not diminish the authority of the state or locality to impose more stringent regulations. But that language presumes that a state or locality does have the authority to regulate. In Illinois, unless a unit adopts or is granted home rule, a locality only has the powers conferred by the state government. So McLean County is a non-home rule entity. So we only have the powers that are conferred by the state of Illinois. So there is no authority that act can diminish. The state of Illinois has not granted the county any authority with regards to protecting drinking water. There is a state law on the Underground Drinking Water Protection Act, just Groundwater Protection Act, and that authorizes the state EPA to protect underground drinking water, and specifically the Mahomet Aquifer is contemplated within that statute. There's an advisory council for the Mahomet Aquifer, but that advisory council doesn't have any authority. It only can make recommendations to the Illinois EPA as to how they're going to regulate. So in my opinion, the county only has zoning authority, which has been granted by the state. And zoning authority generally goes to protecting, conserving values of property throughout the county, lessening or avoiding congestion of the public streetways, lessening or avoiding hazards to persons and damage to property. And while that may sound very general, it has to be construed kind of in light of all the other laws, including the Groundwater Drinking Protection Act.
Right.
So, in my opinion, this is what we're allowed to do.
Right, thank you so much for that. So, I mean, as I say, part of our conversation is about, what we feel about these things, how we want to protect McLean County and what we're kind of legally able to do. And a lot of the suggestions that have been floated about moratoria and the like don't have an effective law. And so while they might send a message, the general feeling of the work group was to be a bit more proactive. And what we see in front of you today is a text amendment, which of course is open to discussion, but is a text amendment that has to do with the sort of immediate needs of providing some ground rules around the construction of these wells, should they be permitted by the US EPA. Currently, as we sit here, the company has already drilled a well in Christian County. They haven't been permitted by the EPA for pouring, but they've drilled a well, one presumes for testing of some sort. And it's given us the opportunity to see what that looks like on the ground, what that actually, the experience of people who are nearby. Phil, I'd like you certainly are better able to answer this, but it's my understanding that the company's asking for what our rules are gonna be, right? What are the kind of parameters around these wells as a zoning issue that we're going to implement as the company seeks the permits, right? They are still applying for permits. And I would just sort of make a note that the EPA permit process is long and the ICC permit process is 11 months at minimum. So we're not talking about something happening tomorrow, but there's a sort of imperative for us to get some basic rules on the ground about some safety issues. So we can talk about what we chose to put in that list today about, distances and things like that in just a minute. But what I'd like to sort of talk about is the arc here. This is what we're doing today in the short term, given the demands on us and the sort of, the process that's in front of the company as they apply for permits. But the long-term goal is, in fact, to hire legal representation. So you'll see in our budget that's going to come up for approval in the next couple of months, some money to hire a lawyer who is a specialist in this type of thing to intervene on behalf of the county, both in the ICC and the EPA processes, to represent the interests of the county, and that is primarily to request that the EPA not allow permitting of a CO2 well over the Muhammad Aquifer. That does violate the EPA's own rules to be putting this through an aquifer, but they do allow exceptions, and so we're going to intervene to suggest and hope that they will not allow. Can you please turn your phone off? Everyone, make sure their phones are off. Okay, all right, good. Awesome, thank you. So that is going to require county board approval for that money. It's going to mean that we have to come back a number of times as a work group and as a county to talk about the sort of steps in the process. But rather than do some political theater and put forward a moratorium, which will have no effective law, it's my hope that using the most direct sort of approach, which is having a lawyer intervene on our behalf, is the best way to make a difference, an actual physical, difference. Yes, there has been a financial offer put forward by the company, but no, we haven't accepted it. So, there's a lot of information that floats around, I think in the absence of legislative intervention by Springfield. And we're just gonna have to figure this out one step at a time. And so what you have in front of you today, for my long soliloquy to end, what you have in front of you today is just one very tiny piece to, in the sort of intervening time, make sure that should they apply for a permit, that they understand that we're not going to be allowing them to do what they've done in Christian County, which is put a well right across the street from a woman's home, to have it lit up 24 hours a day, to tear up the roads, and to make a big mess, right? So at least they will know that we are staking that claim for now, and this will be, as I say, just the first of many steps on an arc. So So I will just sort of really quickly go through what is on the list and answer, ask for anybody's comments and feedbacks and whatnot. On the text amendment, it's 1,000 feet from an occupied residence, 1,500 feet from a school, and I've got a suggestion for the verbiage there. There's controls in lighting because the experience of the situation in Christian County was that it was lit up for 24-hour work. This requires a plan and funding for safety with local authorities. The EPA process and the ICC process requires that these companies file and fund safety protocols in those permits. And from my point of view, being overly specific at this point doesn't help us, because we might have situations like, for instance, if the CO2, just worst case scenario, the wells just outside of Atlanta are approved by the EPA, it may not be McLean County who is the fastest responder to that incident. It's going to be Atlanta, which is not in our county. So it's better to have a broader approach, and that because we have a special use permit process in place, they're going to have to present that to the Zoning Board of Appeals and to the county board to get approved. So if we don't like their safety protocol, we have the right to reject it at some point or to amend it. But I think, understanding that these are multi-county systems means that we can't be 100% in control at the outset. We need to see what the span is before we can make those sorts of decisions. And then there's the road piece. But anyways, now, sorry, I said all the things. Phil, if you have a report or anything to add or correct that I've just said.
It's important to realize that to some extent, counties don't have much authority to regulate pipelines. And we wouldn't necessarily want to regulate pipelines because the Illinois Commerce Commission has very stringent requirements and public hearing procedures that we can participate in. And so that with regard to pipelines, we should participate in their public comment period and their approval process. It's also important to realize that US EPA has very strict requirements and inspection procedures for sequestration drilling and the operation of those wells and the closing of those wells. And we wouldn't want to try to supplement their staff with our work to do all the inspections and to follow all their requirements. Although it is important for us to participate in their public process of approving these wells. We saw a draft of an ordinance for Christian County showing that the zoning person is supposed to do all this inspection of this and that and the other thing, only to find out that the zoning guy has been working there 6 months and he hadn't seen the document yet, and he didn't know how many people he was gonna have to hire to do the inspections regarding the CO2 sequestration wells. So what I've recommended, and I followed the direction of the committee that Leah speaks about, subcommittee, to continue to have some basic regulations to let them know that we are in the game and that we want to exercise zoning authority over these sequestration wells. And we think it is likely that we have zoning authority to regulate sequestration wells. We don't think we necessarily have that same authority over pipelines. So where these pipelines go are somewhat limited as to where the wells are. But if we're involved in the zoning process of getting these wells approved, and if we have our rules out there early enough, then it can be included in any plans that the companies have to submit applications to US EPA.
Anybody have any questions for Phil or for any of us who've been in the work group?
Well, is this just the first, in other words, as this thing develops, we can amend this again to be more strict?
Yeah, our first round in the spring was to put in that you have to get a special use. That hasn't changed. This is just adding on, and of course we can change.
And so this is just at least the start.
This is the
And
start.
as we develop and get more information and things,
We'll know better, I think, what actions we wanna take.
yeah,
It may be making more rules in the code, it may not be.
that's what I'm saying. So this doesn't end it.
Correct.
Okay, that's, because I think we should follow through and see if there isn't other restrictions that we can put on this,
As the process
yeah,
develops.
as the process goes on.
Yeah.
In that case, I'll vote for it.
Okay, and I have a text amendment that I would like to make. If it's coming from the chair, do I need to make it a friendly or what? Just a tiny little editorial change. I just wanted to suggest that in the sentence, 1,500 feet from a school, comma, community building, comma, or a commercial / manufacturing building. It's just a small editorial adjustment. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
You got it. Is everybody okay with that small change?
Is everyone okay with it being like a Scrivener's edit or?
Is that
works
okay
for me, yeah.
legally? Yeah.
Could you read that again?
Sure, I wrote it down.
It's on the
Or a
middle of page 24.
instead of and. It was written from a school, comma, community building and commercial manufacturing, comma, or a commercial manufacturing.
Does that start at the lot line or how do we define that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Phil?
When you, let's say a house or a building, it states here a building. Is it the building or the
Yes.
property line?
It's the building.
Why can't we have it
Yeah,
the property line?
What if the house is 3 miles from the property line?
Yeah, that's your,
then it's 3 miles,
Then it's 3
Just
miles.
3 miles.
then it's 3 miles. Your property line is your property line, regardless of your house location, my opinion.
Right. I mean, we'd have to say property line and inhabited residence, so what if your property line is at the road and immediately across your road is an occupied residence of a neighbor? So it would need to be,
They're not gonna build anything because you start all over again. The house is there, there's a road, your property line is at the road, there's a house across the street. They still can't do anything.
it would be 1,000 feet from the.
Yeah,
It's my opinion that if you wanted it to be a mile from the house, you should say it's a mile from the residence, because it would be treating one particular residence preferential to another.
Yeah, would make it uneven.
okay, I got one more thing. When you buy a house, and I've bought many houses, when you buy a house, you get mineral rights on that property, only so many feet, there's a stipulation, you buy a house and no one can do anything, but if they find gold on that house, gold in the land, then that's gonna be your gold, okay? So why are we giving them the right to drill into the land?
We're not giving them the right to do anything.
I'm just saying, when you buy a house, you have the right to say who's going to be doing anything on your land or near it.
Any person who's participating in the sequestration process will have signed a contract with
There
the
we go.
company. So they're being compensated for their, I guess, giving over their land right. But non-participating residents, so if a person lives across the street, we're trying to protect them. So this is the case in Christian County, that the person who lives across the street has given the permit, the ability of the company to drill the well, but the proximity of her home to the road means that the distance between the actual drill site and her home as a non-participating resident is relatively small. I think 300 feet, and we want it to be more than that.
So we're gonna make it a mile?
I'm not the boss.
Ask for more and maybe get less.
Maybe get less from whom?
Just saying, ask for more. A mile. I would like to promote.
Does that actually be a mile?
To be a mile
From occupied, all of it?
from the property line.
So right now, the text says located within 1,000 feet of an occupied residence, 1,000 feet from a livestock shelter, and 1,500 feet from a school, community building, or commercial manufacturing building. You want it to make it a mile from what? All of those?
From the property line, anything. Just make it harder for them.
I don't know that
I think that would be challenged.
5,280 feet, which is
A mile is what?
5,280. No,
Oh,
no.
It is.
Yeah.
Can't use property line, because. The reason you can't use property line, I think, is you gotta have it equal. You say a farmer's got a house and he's got 300 acres, well, his property line is miles. Whereas my property line or a resident's normal lot is very short. It might be 50 feet is the property line for a house or a lot. So that's why I think you have to do the 1,000.
It's
You have to put a number.
okay,
but on the house, but
Using
it provides
property
equal
line just doesn't
protection.
work.
okay,
For
I
each-
want as much this protection as we can, so,
I think it's better protection by the
Better.
residents than the lot line.
right.
Yeah, 1,000 is better for a smaller lot. You know, you've got a lot, but your property line would be 50 feet.
So are you happy to leave it at the 1,000 and 1,500 feet if people have other opinions? 1,000 feet is 3.5 football fields, to
Yeah.
give you a sense of distance. Did you have another comment that you had?
Are we done with the lot line?
I don't know, I don't know.
I'm okay with
So
it.
nobody's
I'm
made
okay.
a motion and has gotten a second to change it so far, so.
1,500 feet instead of doing the 1,000 for a structure, occupied residence to, we're giving more footage for schools.
Yeah.
Why not churches, why not,
Well, that's a community building, that would be
Yeah.
covered under
Yeah.
that, yeah, that would be covered under
so why don't we just do a blanket 1,500?
1,500. We were sort of taking our lead from a bill that was introduced in the Illinois House General Assembly that had these sort of general numbers. We can increase it if that's what the committee wants. We can increase it to 1,500. Is there support to do that?
Is that your motion?
Yes,
Second.
seconds.
So then we would change CO2 sequestration well, to CO2 sequestration wells shall not be located within 1,500 feet of an occupied residence, 1,500 feet from a livestock shelter, and 1,500 feet from a school, community building, or commercial manufacturing building. Is that the motion?
Yes,
All those in favor of approving that amendment, you say aye?
Aye.
Okay, you got that, Phil?
1,500 feet from all of them.
The only other question I had was length of hours for working, and I didn't see that in there. Can we also limit that just instead of 24 hours? Maybe a suggestion from shut down from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m.
You have the legal ability to control the,
working hours.
The working
This is
hours?
just my, yeah.
does that fall inside of zoning?
I guess would that apply to how the well is operated or the construction of the well?
Just construction.
I would have
Because
to research, but that
operational, you
seems
can't.
more within our typical zoning power of.
What do you think, Phil?
It conceivably could be included.
So do you have a specific amendment you'd like to make?
Well, just that it'd be listed there, wherever.
So lighting,
I haven't seen anything on,
so we have lighting for it to be
right,
safe and secure, but not to the glare to extend beyond the boundaries of the facility. So you would say just workage, work cannot commence before a certain,
5 a.m. and must finish by
12 AM, or,
midnight.
yeah, midnight.
5 a.m. to midnight?
well, right now they're working
The
24
shutdown,
hours.
they're working 24 hours. And.
And that's just during the
I-
drilling period.
Correct,
12 midnight to 5 a.m.
yes, sir.
Okay.
No construction drilling during that time.
Yeah. Or let's take it a step farther. There's surely some OSHA noise limits on this stuff, I guess is my question. And again, I don't know where that would apply on any of our zoning.
We have Illinois EPA requirements for noise in our ordinance, performance standards. We could identify that they must meet all performance standards in the ordinance, sound performance standards.
Correct, there you go.
And lighting pollution.
Well, the lighting
The
stipulation here is probably okay. It's on this draft.
Okay,
That is, it's in compliance with it.
it's in compliance.
So, to go back, you're suggesting a new line,
A 6, if you will, that's condition 6.
condition 6, which would be that during the period of the construction of the well, the work stoppage,
No
the work hours would not extend beyond, from 5 a.m. to midnight.
You meant 12 a.m. to midnight, did you? I mean,
5
12 a.m. to 5 a.m.
Yes,
That's what you're proposing.
yes. Suggesting, unless
Are you making that a motion?
I am.
Good.
Have a second for that motion? Second by member Wendt.
All those in favor,
Adopting that?
sorry,
I just wanna, I'm sorry,
Please.
may I? I'm not suggesting that this may not be the best place in the code for the construction regulation. We do have construction regulations in a different section, and this is the portion this is gonna apply to is all about the use standards. So it may make more sense to put this into I'm trying to pull up I think it's 350, chapter 350, section 19, goes to construction permits. I think they will need a construction permit to build the well, and then it might provide more clarity as to when this applies, rather than just a blanket kind of period of hours that may cause confusion.
So would it be better for us to put a kind of hold on that and then come back next month with the suggestion that it go into the right place?
That's
That is to not ignore,
No, that's, exactly, but
okay. So you're
let's
gonna,
get it right.
will you withdraw your motion?
I will withdraw.
Okay. Is that acceptable? Okay, alright. So let's
readdress it.
we readdress it
And
and
I'm sure we'll.
make sure it's in the right place in the code. Okay.
So those were your two, the lot lines and the motion.
Anybody have anything else that they,
Wanted to address.
so we have a text amendment, a friendly editorial Scrivener,
And I added, and then we made
the amendment to change the distances to all be uniform at 1,500 feet.
Yes.
Anything else? There's not a tornado.
I know. First of the month.
Okay, so you all ready to vote on this?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes, thank you, as amended. All right, we're not quite done. All right, so, item 4A, 2 items presented for information, about the transfer station application.
Excuse me, I have another meeting I have to be at, and then I'll leave.
Okay, so reflect that in the notes. Okay, go ahead.
Trevor, do you want to talk about the application? We have an application on file from Henson Disposal for a solid waste transfer station. And you all will be getting copies of that. It's been submitted to the county clerk's office as the first stage. And as copies of it have been sent to the county engineer, regional planning commission, director of building and zoning, health department, county administration, state's attorney's office for our review. And there's a timetable that this has to go through that is something like 90 days from the time it's submitted. There has to be some kind of a public hearing. And county administration has been working to get people's schedules so that they can participate in meetings at different times. I believe maybe you all have received copies of those Google timetables that we need to work on.
Those would be the meetings that were suggested after Thanksgiving.
If I may, if you don't mind stopping by the administration office after this meeting, I have an application to distribute to all the members. This committee will be the hearing committee with the addition of the county board chair. The chair will serve as the chair of this committee for that meeting, but there will be a separate hearing officer who will be who's gone through these processes before and be leading the hearing on behalf of the chair. I think I've sent out an email previously, or I think I gave everyone a memo, just trying to avoid any discussion on the application. You're gonna have to limit your decision to everything that's presented on the record. I know that member Abel had requested some language, and I will get that out, just on how you might respond to constituents who submit any comments or feedback on the application, directing them to the public comment process. They can submit written comments, they can come to the public hearing, but just any kind of, this committee and then the county board will serve as sort of the judges for this application, so you wanna avoid any dialogue with the applicant or people who are interested in the outcome to make sure that your decision is fair and impartial. If you have any questions, feel free to come see me.
I've got a huge book for you.
Oh, great. Everybody loves some reading material. Okay, so is there anything else, Phil, under other?
No.
Yeah, okay. All right, so Cassie, 4B, County Administrator, do you have anything for us?
I have no items for action or to present for information at this meeting.
Okay, fantastic. So under other business and communications, our next meeting is Tuesday, October the 3rd at 9 a.m. Any other comments or other business? Yes.
I'd just like to thank the subcommittee for all their hard work over the last 5 months. This is not an easy process, and if we all had to do that, I'm certainly glad I didn't have to. I appreciate your role, Chair, and administration and everybody. It's a daunting task, and we all struggle with it. We're not gonna make some people happy. We are, and I guess that's our role. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Here, I agree. I don't know how you guys do what you do, but not everybody's gonna be happy with this.
And it's unfolding. I think that's the most important message that I would leave with is we're not done and we don't have all the answers. And it's a process and we're responding as we know what to do and as it makes sense and we can learn from other counties. So, I've gotten to meet a lot of people in other county boards so far, which is really interesting. Right.
And statewide.
And different county boards in the state. So everybody's got such different approaches and different processes and different structures. That's really interesting.
It is, and how the rules in which we have to abide and the overlap with IEPA and federal,
US
it's a
lot.
And I don't know how we get that message out to the public of the work that's being done.
Yeah, but maybe this will get people in McLean County to get involved and want to step up and say something. you know, involved, rather than just sit back and get mad. Can't tell you how many people were mad at us at the parade yesterday. They were saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing with the COT?" But I didn't, you know, I couldn't react. I'm just saying that we gotta get people involved. They gotta be informed instead of shaking their fist at you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to give my long soliloquy, and with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Please take the donuts.